Any Teen Wolf fan knows that a discussion of the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of Teen Wolf would be incomplete without a discussion of one particular ship. A ship that transcended Teen Wolf to become one of the most popular ships of the 2010s. A ship so divisive that talking about it at all makes me kind of anxious, but that I feel I have a scholarly duty to unpack. If you clicked on this video, there's a good chance you already know what Sterek is. Sterek is the name of the most popular ship to come out of MTV's supernatural teen drama series Teen Wolf, the ship between the characters Stiles, Stilinski, and Hale. For anyone who's somehow unaware, or my mom, who unfortunately watches these videos, shipping is the act of rooting for two or maybe more characters to enter a romantic and/or sexual relationship. While this can extend to real people like celebrities, shipping more commonly pertains to fictional characters. You may also hear this referred to as slash, although that term is older and specific to homosexual pairings, whereas shipping can denote any type of relationship. This is typically an active practice that involves engaging with a community of other fans, as well as the consumption and/or creation of fan fiction, fan art, fan videos, fanzines, and other types of fan work. Most fan scholars agree that this practice as we know it today has its roots in the late 1960s to 1980s, when a certain faction of mostly female fans of Star Trek the original series began creating and sharing fan works celebrating the Kirk-Spock pairing, or KS. And of course, the internet has made it much easier for fans to connect with each other and form fan communities, to the point where in this day and age, fandom and fan works are not as much of a dirty little secret anymore, and what some fans call the fourth wall, the boundary between fandom and creator, is not always as clear-cut as it once was. Which leads us to Teen Wolf and Sterek, a very messy situation overall. Messier than an omega in heat. Sorry. In the last year, I've made 3 videos about Teen Wolf. The first was a recap commentary of the first 3 seasons of the MTV show, the second was a review of the Teen Wolf source material from the 80s, and the third was a breakdown of the last 3 seasons of the MTV show and the recent sequel movie. Because Sterek is such a foundational part of the lore of MTV Teen Wolf, I originally planned to include a Sterek segment in my last Teen Wolf video, but as I was writing it, said segment very quickly got out of hand. It was so much longer than the other sections in the video that it was starting to feel a little out of place, so I thought it might make more sense to release it as its own standalone video, a spin-off of sorts. You do not need to have seen my other Teen Wolf videos to enjoy this one, but I will be talking about the ship with the assumption that you've watched Teen Wolf, or at least have a general idea of the story and its characters. Sterek is a divisive ship, and as such, you might be wondering if this is a pro or anti-Sterek video. I'm sorry to disappoint, but I am in fact something of a Sterek centrist. On the one hand, I understand and agree with many of the criticisms of the ship, and on the other, I do feel some nostalgia for it, and I empathize with some of these shippers. I think in many ways they were misled by the show and its creators. So this isn't going to be some persuasive essay on why you should or shouldn't like Sterek. That's not really what interests me here. What I'd like to do is go on more of a deep dive into some of the fandom lore, as well as my own theories as to what caused this ship to become such a phenomenon. For anyone who's watched or is familiar with Teen Wolf but never learned much about Sterek, it might seem odd that this ship was so popular, because these two characters really don't interact that much in the grand scheme of the show. And yet, the popularity of Sterek essentially eclipsed the popularity of any other element of Teen Wolf. No pun intended. How big are we talking? Well, today there are about 125,000 Teen Wolf fanfictions on popular fanwork platform Archive of Our Own. Of those 125,000, about 65,000 of them are Sterek fics. Strangely, the runner-up is Stiles x Peter, which I can only imagine is so popular for being some sort of extension of Sterek. But to be clear, most shows and movies don't amass anywhere near that number of fan works. Sterek is in fact the second most popular male-x-male ship on all of Archive of Our Own, which is pretty darn significant in fan terms. What's more, Tumblr, probably the most fandom-forward social media platform, does this annual year-in-review roundup where they list the most popular fandoms, trends, posts, etc. of the year, and Sterek was in the top 50 ships like 9 years in a row, peaking at number 6 in both 2013 and 2014. So when, how, and why did this start? Well, the very first Sterek fanfiction posted on AO3 is dated June 26th, 2011. For reference, the first episode of Teen Wolf aired on June 5th, 2011. 4 episodes into the series, the people had already started shipping Sterek. I think there are a number of surprisingly complex reasons this ship took off, but first and foremost, to add a little modern context to our conversation, I want to address the primary criticism people tend to bring up about Sterek. It's kind of the elephant in the room when you talk about it these days. The age gap. So, the character of Stiles is a high schooler. I believe he's canonically 16 when the show starts, and the character of Derek is... That's the weird thing about Derek. For most of the show, especially early on, his age feels like a complete mystery. He's older than Scott and Stiles, but it's not clear how much older. It's worth noting that the timeline on this show is very inconsistent in general. It can be difficult to gauge things like current year and the passage of time from season to season. Apparently there's an episode where you can see Derek's ID, and it says he was born in 1988, but that doesn't necessarily match up with other accounts of his age.
That was Derek Hale. You remember, right? He's only like a few years older than us.
In the first episode of the series, Stiles says Derek is only a few years older than him and Scott.
His family? They all burned to death in a fire like 10 years ago.
But he also says that the Hale family fire happened like 10 years ago, and it's established later in the series that Derek was a teenager at the time of the fire, at least 15, since that's how old he was before the fire when his girlfriend Paige died. Teen Wolf creator Jeff Davis replied to a tweet in 2012 saying that Derek was not that old and also not 24, and also seemingly confirmed that the fire happened 6 years ago. I tried to look into this online and I found all sorts of conflicting answers. Some people seem convinced that he was as old as 24 or even older when he was introduced. Some people think he was more like 21, 22, and many people share this detail that supposedly in the original pilot script, Derek was only 19 years old. But in the greater context of the show, it seems most likely that Derek was canonically in his early 20s in season 1. I mention all of this because the main argument against Sterek, at least nowadays, is that it's creepy because it involves shipping a teenager with an adult. And I think this is very valid. It makes sense. I understand why people feel this way, and I agree. I am not trying to defend this at all. However, I do want to raise a few explanations, not justifications, just explanations, for why I think the ship became so popular at the time in spite of this. Because this is an argument that gets brought up a lot nowadays, but from what I can tell, it wasn't as much of a conversation during the peak popularity of the ship. And I think there are a few reasons that might be. Bear with me. So number one, I think we'd be remiss not to acknowledge that much of this fandom was likely composed of children. I'm not naive about stuff like this. I don't doubt there were also plenty of adults involved. Fandom moms have always been a thing, but the primary demographic of Teen Wolf was 12 to 34, and apparently they did especially well with the 12 to 17 age group. I know that when I first watched this show, I was around 13 or 14, and I imagine a lot of other fans were in a similar boat. So just first and foremost, I think it's worth noting that actual kids, actual teens shipping Sterek at the time were not engaging with this ship in a creepy or predatory way. They were just kids who didn't really understand the implications of a dynamic like that. Second of all, although 2011-2012 might not seem like that long ago, when it comes to stuff like this, it was in many ways a different time. There were all sorts of YA shows and movies at the time that were just completely indifferent, or in some cases supportive, of teen-adult relationships or even teacher-student relationships. I talked about this way back in my Degrassi video, but Degrassi, probably the most responsible teen show of all time, did not portray a teacher-student relationship in a negative light until like 2013. Prior to that, they depicted these relationships in a pretty uncritical way, sometimes even a romanticized way. And then you have Pretty Little Liars. I never got very far into Pretty Little Liars myself, but that show featured one of its teenage characters having a romance with one of her adult teachers, and by the end of the series, they were married. Even The Vampire Diaries had Elena, a 17-year-old, fall in love with Damon, a vampire frozen at the age of 25. And I personally haven't seen much discourse of this sort about that show. Maybe it exists, but I don't think it was very mainstream, if so. So again, this does not justify the idea of an underage character having a romance with an adult character, but I think it does help explain why kids watching in the early 2010s would not necessarily think critically about it. On top of that, I feel like even the optics of the casting of Teen Wolf played a part here. As I've joked about before, Teen Wolf cast a lot of actors who were obviously too old to play teens. Tyler Posey and Dylan O'Brien were only like 21 when the show began, but some of these actors were already pushing 30. And I just want to acknowledge for the record that Tyler Hoechlin, who played Derek, was the same age and in some cases younger than some of the actors playing teenagers on the show. He would have been about 23 when the show began, which, as a 23-year-old myself, is depressing to contemplate. So again, for kids watching this show, it may not have registered visually that these were supposed to be characters with an age gap. You know what I mean? In reality, these were both adults a couple years apart in age, and I think for viewers of a certain age, it can be harder to separate what is fiction and what is reality when it comes to stuff like this. Finally, I think we have to take into account the mechanisms of the show itself. This show teased a romance between Lydia and Parrish, a high school teenager and a grown adult, and sometimes had Derek flirt with teen characters like Erica, without really questioning the age thing. So I don't think even Teen Wolf itself was particularly sensitive or appropriate regarding the age differences between various characters. There's also the nebulous nature of Derek's role on the show. I talked about this in my first Teen Wolf video, that Derek occupies this weird space where it's not super clear what the writers intended for him. He's not a high school student, but he also doesn't have a job or a role that defines him as a type of adult, the way the other adult characters are defined. I said in my first video that they might have been better off making Derek a teacher or parent or something, just anything to better establish what his place in the Teen Wolf world was supposed to be. As it is on the show, he's not really that distinguishable from any of the high school characters. With that, and the show's tendency to treat its teen characters more like little adults than underage children, if fans got a certain impression about the viability of a romantic connection between Stiles and Derek, I think the show itself shares a good deal of responsibility there. So that's my little disclaimer. I fully agree with the idea that it is bad for an underage teenager to date an adult, but I think in the case of Sterek specifically, there are a couple contextual details that help explain why people may have overlooked that dimension of the ship at the time. I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way as my explanation for why I might not bring it up that much in the rest of my discussion. I do get it, I do agree, but I honestly think it's not always necessarily that that relevant to how fans or the show itself engaged with the ship at the time. But I digress. With this ship being so popular, you'd think there would be a strong foundation of Stiles and Derek's relationship in the source material, right? Let's take a look at all of the actual Sterek content that exists in the text. Canon. While writing this, it was really time-consuming to pick through every episode, so I decided to see if anyone had compiled a list of all major Sterek interactions, and I found this beautiful website made by someone named Daniela from Germany, who knows how many years ago. It has all sorts of fandom stuff on it, but look at it. Say what you want about Sterek itself, but this is such a clear labor of love that it almost made me cry. So thank you, Daniela, for this invaluable resource. Stiles and Derek have a few interactions throughout Season 1, most of them highly antagonistic, and some of them physically involved, which probably explains why shippers took them and ran with them. Shippers love when two hot guys shove each other against walls and stuff, and they also love the enemies to lovers thing, so I think that's much of why this pairing appealed to them.
Start the car, or I'm gonna rip your throat out with my teeth.
One of the most notable Sterek interactions in this season is them being stuck together in episode 4, when Derek has been poisoned by wolfsbane and Stiles almost has to cut his arm off.
You're gonna cut off my arm.
So romantic. And then there's the whole Cousin Miguel incident in episode 9, where Stiles kind of bribes Stanny with Derek's hot bod.
You swing for a different team, but you still play ball, don't you, Danny boy? You're a horrible person.
Season 2 sees the writers pairing up Stiles and Derek a little more often, usually to maximize the comedic potential of their contrasting personalities. In episode 2, Derek and Stiles team up to free Isaac from jail, which results in plenty of banter. Episode 4 features a very notable sequence when Derek gets paralyzed by the Canema and falls into the school swimming pool, and Stiles reluctantly jumps in to save him, after which they have to stay in the pool together because the Canema's afraid of water. This is kind of a development from Season 1 because now, instead of just pure animosity, you have stuff like this where Stiles is actively choosing to save Derek. Whereas in the last season, he explicitly wanted Derek dead.
Could you at least think about letting him die? For me.
That's growth. Then, in episode 10 comes another big one. Derek and Stiles both get Canema paralyzed this time, and they fall on top of each other, and we get what I believe is the only explicit reference the show ever made to the idea of a romantic pairing of Derek and Stiles.
Get him off of me.
Oh, I don't know, Derek. I think you two make a pretty good pair.
And then they spend some time paralyzed together after that. While there are some interactions in Season 3, mostly in a similar comedic antagonistic style as the first two seasons, these interactions never quite reach the same caliber as the ones in Season 2, for reasons I'll discuss in a moment. There is this one strange moment in episode 7 where right after Boyd has died and Derek is devastated, Stiles comes over and puts a comforting hand on his shoulder. It's honestly kind of weird. Nothing we've ever seen between these characters would suggest that that kind of interaction would be normal for them. At the top of episode 11, Derek and Stiles have this moment in an elevator. Derek is unconscious and Stiles is trying to wake him up. Again, it's physically involved, which shippers like. In episode 21, we find out that Void Stiles has rearranged Stiles' chessboard, and Derek is the king. I don't even really remember what this actually means in the story, but Sterek fans were really excited about it at the time.
Think there's any reason why my name's on the king?
Then, at the very end of the season, there's this scene where Stiles and Derek are talking in the school locker room and trying to figure out if Derek is dreaming or not, which it turns out he is. He's been kidnapped by Kate. So, of course, you have this question of why Stiles in Derek's dream? I've seen some people speculate that this must mean that Stiles is Derek's emotional anchor. I think that is a bit of a stretch, but it definitely is a little weird that of all people, Stiles, who Derek always claims to dislike, would be like guiding him in his dreams. Season 4 doesn't have a lot of Sterek interactions, but they do spend some time together when Derek is magically de-aged.
Miguel. It's my cousin Miguel.
Hey, at least we don't have to worry about the moral implications of this ship anymore. They hang out with Scott's dad, there's more pushing up against walls. I don't even want to think about the fan fiction this storyline probably spawned. In the season 4 finale, Stiles and regular grown-up Derek have this scene in a van with Liam, one of their only real scenes together in the season, but it's not very shippy, I wouldn't say. Now, Tyler Hoechlin left the show after season 4 and did not return until the very end of season 6, so as you can imagine, there's not much overt Sterek content from season 5 and 6A, but remember, shippers are very good at grasping at straws. At the beginning of season 5, the gang is doing this tradition that Beacon Hills seniors do in their final year of high school, where they write their initials on a shelf in the school library. And there's this little moment where Stiles sees Derek's initials and kind of looks at them fondly before writing his own. I think I remember when this happened back in the day, even though I had stopped watching at that point. I feel like I remember when this hit Tumblr. But that's basically it for season 5. Nothing at all in 6A from what I can tell. I'm not sure they even mention Derek in this half season. Then, although both Derek and Stiles are largely absent from 6B, Stiles has a little scene at the end of the first episode where he's in an FBI training program being his silly little self, and he hears that Derek is wanted by the FBI for mass murder, and he does a big spit take.
Chasing down a bizarrely feral unsub in the wilderness of North Carolina.
So I guess if you were already a Sterek shipper, you would probably interpret this as a Sterek moment. Then, in the very last episode of the show, both Derek and Stiles are back, and they do have this rather significant shippy moment. Stiles is recounting how he and Derek met back up when the FBI was pursuing him. The way Stiles tells it, he heroically saved Derek's life.
Long story short, I basically, had to save his life.
But Derek contradicts him, saying that he in fact had to carry Stiles out of there.
You couldn't walk, and I know that because I was carrying you.
So there we have it. It's like Jeff Davis just couldn't bear to end the show without one last little smidgen of Sterek queerbait. It's actually kind of heartwarming. And then there's the Teen Wolf sequel movie from last year. You might be like, how could the movie have any Sterek moments if Dylan O'Brien wasn't in it? Well, how could season 5 have any Sterek moments if Tyler Hoechlin wasn't in it? The movie is set 13 or maybe 15 years after the end of the show, and Derek is now a single dad to a teenager. More on that in my last Teen Wolf video. Strangely, Derek's son character, Eli, is obsessed with Stiles' Jeep. Here's where we get to the really weird thing. Derek now runs an auto body shop, don't ask me, and he has kept Stiles' Jeep and painstakingly fixed it up, but doesn't allow anyone to drive it. So he's very annoyed by his son stealing it and going for joyrides in it.
Why the hell does he keep taking the Jeep?
Because he knows I hate it.
And then, when Derek dies at the end, again, don't ask me, Sheriff Stilinski gifts Eli the Jeep, and he's like, your dad had a complicated relationship with that Jeep.
Your dad had complicated feelings about that Jeep.
Did he? Why? Since when? I'm sorry to side with the shippers here, but I do think this is incredibly weird. I don't know what they intended with this, unless it really was some bizarre, indirect attempt at more Sterek bait. This is like deeper Tumblr lore, but hey, you're several minutes into a Sterek autopsy video, so you're probably already familiar. But in the last season of the show Supernatural, this thing happened that instantly went down in Tumblr shipping history. So the Supernatural fandom spawned this really popular non-canon gay ship called Destiel. It's this guy, Dean, a hunter of supernatural creatures, and this guy, Castiel, an angel from heaven. This is one of the most popular slash ships of all time, even more popular than Sterek. The show never seemed particularly interested in making it canon, but in the final season, season 15, episode 18, Castiel confesses his love for Dean, for all intents and purposes.
Why does this sound like a goodbye? Because it is. I love you.
The actor, Misha Collins, is really giving it his all, like almost too much. Dean, for his part, looks completely dead inside, not at all matching the energy.
Don't do this, Cass.
After doing this, Castiel is immediately dragged to a hell-like place called the Empty, and the character is essentially dead after this. This episode exploded on the internet for a few reasons. One, this took place just 2 days after the 2020 US presidential election, so emotions were running high. But it was also the incredibly strange direction of the scene, the disparate energy of the performances, and of course the fact that Destiel had partially been made canon, albeit in an extremely cruel, miserable, one-sided way. Fans joked that the Empty that Cass had been sent to was actually called Super Hell, and pointed out the unfortunate implications of a character seemingly coming out as queer before instantly being banished to Super Hell. The entire incident would be dubbed Destielgate, and would leave a lasting impact not only on the supernatural fandom, but on the fandom and shipping worlds at large. Anyway, this scene itself became a meme format, and it's still common to see major news broken on Tumblr through this meme. Like, if you logged onto Tumblr on November 29th, 2023, this might have been how you found out Henry Kissinger had died. And when the Teen Wolf movie aired, some fans were quick to point out that Derek revealing some sort of mysterious affinity for Stiles' Jeep, and later being brutally burned to death along with the Nogitsune, was not wholly unlike Castiel confessing his love for Dean and instantly being sent to Super Hell. They're not actually that similar, but again, shippers love to make connections where there are none. That's not very relevant to anything I'm talking about. I just wanted to bring up Destielgate. I wasn't even in that fandom, I just find it really funny. But anyway, that's all of the major canon Sterek fodder. You'll notice that the show had a fair amount of involved Stiles and Derek interactions at first, and a couple towards the end of the show, but largely avoided that sort of thing in the middle few seasons. Yes, Tyler Hoechlin left the show, but even before that, in seasons 3 and 4, I'd say the interactions between Stiles and Derek have a different tone than they did in those first 2 seasons. It feels like there's a wall up, like they're afraid to put the 2 characters in the same room for too long. I believe this is a result of the showrunners' shifting attitudes towards Sterek and the Sterek fandom, which is the next element of this that I want to discuss, the history of the fandom-creator relationship regarding Sterek. Sterek and the powers that be. In fandom communities, fans sometimes refer to the creators, writers, or even actors involved in their favorite fictional works as the powers that be, which going forward is how I'll be referring to the people in charge of making Teen Wolf. There's a big tendency in modern TV fandom to ascribe all the power, authority, and creative control of a particular show to 1 or 2 people, the original creators and/or showrunners. For example, the Sherlock fandom typically attributes all of the good and bad of the show to the 2 creator showrunners, Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss. On any given season of Doctor Who, fans tend to attribute all good and bad to the showrunner of that particular run. And in the case of Teen Wolf, fans have historically attributed all good and especially all bad to creator and showrunner Jeff Davis. Which, don't let me stop you from hating on Jeff Davis. He isn't very good at making teen werewolf television, in my opinion, but I do think this habit of pretending that the creator or showrunner of a show is directly responsible for every single creative decision therein is a little ignorant of the way television production works. To quote the movie Urban Legend's Final Cut, film is a collaborative medium. And especially on network television, there's far less likely to be one big auteur figure imbuing the work with their unique vision. Unlike in cinema, there's a whole room of writers, and different people might be in charge of writing different episodes. So I'm going to use the term powers that be, and when I use that, I guess I'm referring to Jeff Davis, the writer's room at any given point on the show, and perhaps also the producers, anyone who would have had any creative input in what actually took place on the show. Anyway, it's well documented that in the early days of Teen Wolf, specifically during the first 2 seasons, the powers that be were not only aware of Sterek, but would often actively encourage engagement from Sterek fans. It wasn't just Sterek. The show really fostered all sorts of fan activity and parasociality from the beginning, in part by enlisting a social media manager named Matt McDonough, who ran the Teen Wolf Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. This was undeniably a great marketing decision on the show's part. Matt clearly had a very relevant, in-touch understanding of the way young people were using social media at the time. The Teen Wolf Tumblr, especially, is a joy to revisit. It's such a time capsule. Its early posts are like half actual Teen Wolf content and half general aesthetic wolf posting. Matt really had his finger on the pulse here. Not only would the social media accounts sometimes explicitly mention or encourage Sterek shipping, but even the powers that be themselves would occasionally bring up Sterek. According to fan lore, people like Jeff Davis and Dylan O'Brien themselves would occasionally tweet things that would really stoke the flames of Sterek. I think Jeff Davis has since deleted his Twitter, so all we have are screenshots, but hilariously, these Dylan O'Brien tweets are still up to this day. Bizarrely, fellow TV showrunner and film director Greg Berlanti apparently also shipped Sterek. These tweets are still up as well. In general, it seems like the powers that be's attitude towards Sterek was at worst jocular and at best outwardly encouraging. And of course, the official Teen Wolf social media channels seemed pro-Sterek, which only furthered the idea that it was kind of an officially recognized ship, giving people hope that maybe it would become canon one day. But this pro-Sterek attitude among the powers that be arguably reached its crescendo in the summer of 2012, when, in an attempt to spur fans to vote for Teen Wolf for Choice Summer TV Show in the 2012 Teen Choice Awards, actors Dylan O'Brien and Tyler Hoechlin recorded a video of themselves sitting suggestively on a boat. A ship, if you will. I'm just gonna play the entire video, if I can, so that we have full context.
I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to...
Well, we've warned you.
Tyler.
Yeah.
Wake up.
No.
We're on a ship. Pun intended. Whoa.
Hey, man.
Hey, buddy.
Oh, hey, guys.
Oh, hey, guys.
Whoa, there's like a whole bunch of people right there.
Yeah, look. Didn't see the audience. We should.
Oh, we were supposed to tell them something.
We want to ask if you guys could vote for Teen Wolf with the Teen Choice Awards.
For Choice Summer Show, right?
Best Choice Summer Show. Yeah. Yep. Can you please do it? Because if you do,
we'll take
that's all that needs to be said.
We'll take more notes.
I'm still tired. Let's go back to sleep.
Needless to say, they did end up winning Choice Summer TV Show.
Who thinks werewolves are cooler than Glee Club members?
As I've established, it wasn't uncommon for Teen Wolf to engage with shippers at the time, but I think this was the moment when the powers that be really crossed a line in terms of fan incitement. I'm coining a new concept, fan incitement. It seems like historically, people have a tendency to really blame fans when a particular ship goes nuclear, including in this case, but I honestly think Team Teen Wolf itself made some pretty disastrous missteps in the early days of the show that basically guaranteed that Sterek would breach containment. To be fair, there's no handbook that tells you exactly what to do when your TV show or movie or book suddenly amasses a huge gay shipping fan base out of nowhere. This is a very unique, ineffable phenomenon. And even as recently as 2011, this was still pretty new to the mainstream. Destiel had only been around for a couple years, BBC's Sherlock had only just begun, Tumblr hadn't even been acquired by Yahoo yet. I imagine the Teen Wolf powers that be saw that fans were starting to ship these two random characters who had not been at all set up romantically, and thought it was just a weird, funny little novelty, a fringe movement at most. They were probably curious, intrigued, and maybe found it fun to sort of poke at the Sterek hornet's nest from time to time, not realizing how intense these fan movements can become. So early on, you see friendly interactions between Sterek fans and the powers that be. You see pro-Sterek stuff on the show's official Tumblr account. You even see one explicit reference to the idea of Sterek in the show itself, pretty clearly a response to fans.
Oh, I don't know, Derek. I think you two make a pretty good pair.
I almost have this theory formed about the way shows engage with non-canon ships, that the second you reference the ship in the show, it's over. Once you start doing self-aware nudge nudge, wouldn't they be a cute couple moments, you're done. That's the point of no return, to put it in phantom terms. Because shippers, by nature, will extrapolate anything from anything. They will feast on crumbs. Any hint you give them towards their ship, even if you only meant it as a mean-spirited joke, only provides them with more ammunition, more clues for their conspiracy board. Both Supernatural and Sherlock certainly learned this the hard way.
We're not a couple.
Yes, you are.
If you're a creator and you truly want nothing to do with a popular non-canon ship, the best thing you can do is ignore it. Pretend it does not exist. Do not engage with fans of the ship. Do not make meta jokes about the ship. You are only sabotaging yourself. So here we are, back at the boat video. Again, I think this was the other major turning point. If this joke in Season 2 was the textual point of no return for Sterek, then the boat video was the metatextual fourth wall point of no return. They had officially gone way too far in terms of encouraging Sterek fans, and no matter how hard they tried to stuff the worms back into the can in the years that followed, they would never fully succeed. In my opinion, this is almost certainly why, post-Season 2, Derek and Stiles just never really have the same level of interaction they had in the first two seasons, and also why the powers that be's engagement with Sterek fans pretty much totally ceased post-2013 or so. I think they realized, probably shortly after the release of this video, that they had messed up. And instead of just sticking to their guns, ignoring the fans, and continuing to write the characters like normal, it seems like they started actively avoiding situations where Derek and Stiles would be alone together. Which I think is too bad. On a completely platonic, non-shipping level, I really liked watching Stiles and Derek interact in the first couple seasons. There's a reason, beyond irresponsible fan interaction, that this ship first became popular. These characters are foils to each other. Stiles is the silliest character on the show, and Derek the most serious. This gives them a fun dynamic, and their scenes together were funny. Jeff Davis himself says in this interview from 2012 that when they first started writing the show, they had a list of great pairings to try out, at the top of which was Derek and Stiles. This is visible in the first two seasons, but starting in Season 3, this just isn't really allowed to exist anymore. I think this change was detrimental to the show, and honestly, I don't blame Sterek shippers for causing it. I am more inclined to blame the powers that be for handling this so terribly. So that's how they bungled this situation outside of the show. But now let's talk about how they set themselves up for failure within the show itself. The inevitability of Sterek. Beyond the creators exacerbating Sterek mania through their interactions with fans, I think they had already inadvertently sabotaged themselves in the actual text of the show. I've explained part of why the Stiles-Derek dynamic is compelling, their contrasting personalities, the physically intense antagonistic thing, but I don't think that's the only reason the ship took off. I think a phenomenon this significant wouldn't have been possible without a couple of other contributing factors. Firstly, both of these characters, especially Stiles, were fan favorites from the beginning. Stiles was an instant fan favorite, probably mostly due to Dylan O'Brien's star-making performance and Stiles' sad backstory. I think fangirls love a character who has a lighthearted exterior but is secretly plagued by trauma. That's very compelling to a teenage Tumblr user. Then you have Derek, who I can only imagine attracted a big fan base early on, mostly by virtue of being so stupidly, breathtakingly hot. I'm sorry to speak so plainly, but let's be real here. Derek was probably the most objectified character on the show at the time. He was also a mysterious bad boy, which I'd say is why he edged out someone like Scott, who was also very good looking and objectified by the show, but was maybe a less compelling type of character to most fangirls watching at home. By the way, yes, I do find it very sad and unfair that Tyler Posey's star turn was so often eclipsed by Stiles and Sterek. I feel bad that Posey had to deal with that. While researching for this video, I found out about something fans have dubbed Poseygate, which was an incident where Tyler Posey, when asked about Sterek in 2014, said that Sterek was, quote, a bizarre, weird, twisted thing, and I think that anyone who pays more attention to Sterek than the show isn't watching the show for the right reasons, unquote. Wow, he pulled out the Bachelor reasoning.
She's not here for the right reasons.
Apparently many fans were predictably very upset about this. I feel like it's not that big of a deal. For one thing, it kind of seems like Tyler Posey will just say anything in interviews, so I don't think there was any need to take this too seriously. But also, I totally understand his frustration at being sidelined by fans of his own show that he starred in favor of something that wasn't even canon. I imagine that was really hard to deal with at the time. Even if not for Sterek, it seems like there was always so much more fandom love for Stiles than for Scott, and if I played Scott, I probably would have been annoyed by that too. Anyway, regardless of whether it was fair, Stiles and Derek were fan favorites early on, but that wasn't the only reason it was easy to pair them up. Stiles and Derek were notably two of the only main characters in the first season who did not have love interests. Scott and Allison had each other, Lydia and Jackson had each other, I guess there was like Danny, but he wasn't a main character like the others. Of course, Stiles had been set up as liking Lydia, but again, she was officially paired up with Jackson, and Stiles didn't spend much of his time actively pursuing her. It would mostly come up as a joke from time to time. Then you have Derek, who is just this weirdo loner with not even a hint of a love interest. So, you know, do the math. We have two fan favorite characters, no clear love interest to pair them up with, and they happen to have contrasting personalities that give them an antagonistic relationship with moments that hint at the development of a more trusting bond. They never had a chance. But I'm still not done. I have a theory that's going to blow your mind. Maybe, probably not. Months ago, when I was working on my first Teen Wolf video, I was thinking a lot about Derek's role on the show. As I've described, it's weird. It's a little muddled and poorly defined. It's hard to tell what the writer's intentions with Derek were, and notably, he's one of the only main characters on the show with no clear analog to the 1985 film. Scott and Stiles are Scott and Stiles, and you could argue that Jackson and Lydia were inspired by the characters of Mick and Pam, especially if we assume that the creators of MTV Teen Wolf were influenced by the Teen Wolf cartoon, which I like to assume because it's funny. Allison isn't that similar to Boof, but just being the love interest for Scott implies that she's the Boof descendant. The show has swapped OG Scott's single father for MTV Scott's single mother, but that's not too much of a stretch. Maybe they had already decided to give Stiles a strong father figure and wanted to give Scott a mom instead. But Derek is an outlier. Who is Derek? Why is Derek? Keep that in your mind. Also, in my first video, I mentioned that Teen Wolf was clearly another entry in the slew of supernatural teen romances that followed the success of Stephenie Meyer's Twilight. And what other major entry in this movement came out right in between Twilight and Teen Wolf? That's right, The Vampire Diaries. And who was the shining star of The Vampire Diaries? The element that carried that show and became an overnight sensation? You might think it would be Elena. I wish. It's actually Damon. Damon Salvatore and Ian Somerhalder in general were the moment. This character and actor were exceedingly popular. I know I don't have much beyond anecdotal, observational evidence of this, but in my defense, if we look at the People's Choice Awards and Teen Choice Awards nominations accrued by The Vampire Diaries, excluding times they were nominated together, Nina Dobrev was nominated 13 times, while Ian Somerhalder was nominated a whopping 20 times. I never said it was fair. This is a man's world. We can't all be choice male hottie. Anyway, Damon, this morally ambiguous bad boy vampire, was an incredibly popular character. And given that Derek is this rather random addition to Teen Wolf, seemingly unrelated to the source material, my theory is that Derek happened because Damon happened. I think it's possible that while developing Teen Wolf, the writers looked at The Vampire Diaries, one of their clear influences, saw Damon, and said to themselves, we should get one of those. Derek and Damon are both supernatural bad boys, they're both morally ambiguous and even antagonistic at first, before gradually being softened, in Damon's case by the love of Elena, and in Derek's case by the camaraderie of Scott's pack. They're both a little bit older than the main characters and make a dramatic return to town in the pilot episodes following a long absence. They're both hot guys in leather jackets, they both have two-syllable names that start with D. The evidence is damning. I have heard that Jeff Davis was also influenced by Buffy, so it's very possible that Derek is an amalgam of any number of bad boy supernatural leather jacket men, but for the purposes of this YouTube video, we're focusing on Damon. Of course, these are all generic similarities, and the characters have their differences as well, but I'm not trying to argue plagiarism here, just potential inspiration. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Derek was vaguely inspired by Damon. Even if he wasn't, if this is just coincidence, they are similar and fill similar roles in their respective shows' first seasons. However, there's one big difference between these two characters. Can you see what it is? Can you guess what fundamental difference there is between the role of Damon and the role of Derek? Well, Damon is a love interest. That's his purpose. He isn't just some self-actualized bad boy. He exists nearly exclusively to date our protagonist, Elena. Derek, as we've already established, doesn't have a love interest until 3 seasons into Teen Wolf. Before then, he is completely and desolately alone. We've got a Category 5 teen drama misstep on our hands, a love interest character misguidedly reshaped into a nebulous, non-love interest outsider, a little lost boyfriend with no one to love. What's more, one could argue that in The Vampire Diaries, Elena is sort of like the viewer's self-insert character, and therefore, by shipping Damon with Elena, the prototypical viewer is essentially shipping Damon with themselves. Teen Wolf in general is a bit of an outlier in the post-Twilight supernatural teen drama boom because of its male protagonist. Typically, these types of work feature female protagonists being romanced by sexy, mysterious bad boys. Given that the audience for this genre is largely female, the average reader or spectator can identify with the female protagonist and vicariously live out a safe and controlled romantic or sexual fantasy. The presence of an almost exclusively male point of view on Teen Wolf results in a rather more transgressive form of audience identification. The audience for Teen Wolf was still largely female, so if not Bella or Elena, who was the female viewer identifying with on Teen Wolf? I wish I could say it was Scott, and maybe there were some viewers who enjoyed vicarious experiences through Scott, but I think it's far more likely that the majority of female viewers were identifying with Stiles. Scott is a heterosexual boy with a female love interest, so for any heterosexual girls watching the show, Scott's love story would not be a source of vicarious pleasure. His relationship with Allison also makes him less available as an object of desire character on the show. Straight female viewers might not be as interested in Scott given that he already has a love interest, and I doubt they'd be inclined to identify with Allison since she is more object than subject, at least in this first season. We rarely see her inner world or point of view in their relationship. Stiles, on the other hand, doesn't have a clear-cut love interest at first. He's also, in many ways, a more androgynous character than Scott. For one thing, Stiles stays human throughout the show. He doesn't have the werewolf transformation that enhances Scott's traditionally masculine traits, things like athletic prowess and sexual initiative. Stiles is also often placed in the more passive damsel position on the show. As one of the few human characters, he's often in danger, often kidnapped, often needs to be rescued by Scott, by Derek, by his father. We can even point to Stiles' possession by the Nagitsune in Season 3. If I were to really get into it, I'd say that scholars of gender in horror, like Barbara Creed and Carol J. Clover, have both brought attention to the fact that possession, as a convention in horror cinema, is traditionally a symbolically feminine affliction. Speaking psychosexually, a possessed body is a passive body, a penetrated body.
Let me in, Stiles. Let me in.
And historically, it is mostly women who fall victim to possession in cinema and television, as well as who tend to possess the second sight or intuition for the supernatural, traits Stiles also has. The possessed male body is much rarer, and again speaks to something more subversive at play in MTV's Teen Wolf, no matter how unintentional. Of course, there are also many moments on Teen Wolf implying that Stiles is not straight.
Am I not attractive to gay guys? Am I attractive to gay guys? You didn't answer my question.
One more question.
What?
Do you find me attractive?
And I also gotta say, this newfound heroism is making me very attracted to you.
Shut up.
No, seriously. Do you want to just try making out for a sec? Just to see how it feels.
You're not gay.
Well, I could be.
Not dressed like that.
Like, someone needs to sex me right now.
All right, I'll do it.
Whoa!
That was so sweet. Are you kidding?
Yes.
I'm kidding.
Okay, you don't toy with a guy's emotions like that, Danny. It's not attractive.
These are mostly played for laughs, but there's one bizarre moment in Season 3 where Stiles is talking to a bisexual girl, and the show kind of heavily implies that he may be realizing he's bisexual as well.
Do you also like boys?
Absolutely. Do you?
And then it never goes anywhere or is mentioned or hinted at ever again. This show has been accused of queerbaiting when it comes to Sterek, and well, I'd call the paratextual stuff like the boat video queerbaiting. I don't always think the textual stuff is very convincing, but I would call this actual textual queerbaiting. It's pretty bad. Nevertheless, it's demonstrable that Stiles is at times both coded as queer and coded as feminine. In other words, to quote renowned feminist film scholar Shakira, there's a she-wolf in the closet. If we take all of this at face value, we have a romantically unavailable protagonist with little potential for female relatability being upstaged by a highly likable single character implied to be bisexual who embodies both masculine and feminine characteristics. And on the other hand, we have a big, sexy bad boy werewolf simply teeming with untapped romantic potential and blatantly framed as a sexual object by the show itself. It was a perfect storm of gay shipping potential. I've truly never seen anything else like it. In my opinion, many viewers, in a frankly radical exercise of cross-gender audience identification, projected themselves onto Stiles and through him enjoyed a vicarious romantic sexual fantasy with Derek. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that this was only straight people. Oh no, what do you take me for? Like I said, Stiles possesses this interesting narrative androgyny, and as a result, he presents a relatable self-insert for more than one type of viewer. I imagine queer male viewers might also choose Stiles first as a self-insert, and with Stiles being a rather androgynous character who's implied to be bisexual, I can also see queer female viewers finding a vicarious thrill in Stiles, or non-binary viewers enjoying arguing his blurring of the narrative's gender boundaries. Furthermore, I came across this really interesting article by Ari Page in the Transformative Works and Cultures journal about how certain transmasculine Teen Wolf fans have essentially created their own representation in the form of Teen Wolf fan works, especially through Stiles and Sterek. Page details how many transmasculine fans headcanon Stiles as trans, using resonant details from the show, like Stiles not going by his birth name, being concerned with appearing masculine enough, even the way he dresses. Page also points out the gender-fluid nature of lycanthropy, the werewolf's double-edged symbolic sword of hypermasculinity and cyclical lunar femininity, not to mention the physical transformation of the werewolf being analogous to some of the physical aspects of gender transition. It's a great read, and I'll link it in the description. This is one of the reasons I've always taken issue with the popular fandom assumption that gay male ships becoming popular with female audiences is merely the result of straight women fetishizing gay men. I used to see this kind of perspective on Tumblr all the time. There may be a grain of truth in there, but looking back on it now, I think this is a pretty reductive assessment, and honestly betrays an ignorance of the established literature on the subject. Not only do I think there's more complexity to the relationship between heterosexual female fans and their male homoerotic ships, but I dislike that this perspective essentially erases all fans of these ships who are not straight women. I've always had this theory that probably a lot of the kids who got on Tumblr in the early 2010s thought they were straight women, but later discovered that they were queer women, or trans men, or non-binary.
That is who you are.
Tumblr has a pretty clear core demographic now, and I don't think it's mainly straight women. Basically, I think far more fans of stuff like this than we once thought may in fact be LGBT themselves, and even for those that aren't, it may not be as simple as fetishizing gay men. The early scholarship on this subject by people like Joanna Russ, Patricia Fraser Lamb, and Diana Veith posits that female fans of early Kirk and Spock / may not have really been writing about homosexual men, but instead about an idealized androgynous relationship in which both participants are truly equal and free from the constraints of the patriarchy, something that was generally not available to women in traditional romance literature. But what of the Sterek shippers who seem to use the ship to act out their desire for Stiles? Are they identifying with Derek? Maybe partially, but I also don't want to discount the eroticism of identification itself. For fans attracted to Stiles, perhaps there's an autoerotic appeal to the very act of projecting oneself onto him. Or maybe we shouldn't be assuming that the erotic appeal of shipping must be directly participatory. Maybe there's an inherent eroticism to not being a participant. Maybe shipping is a voyeuristic pleasure. I'm kind of just riffing now. I hope this hasn't come across as too pro-Sterek, but I figure this is such a divisive ship that no matter what I say, someone's probably going to get mad at me. Do I support Sterek? Not exactly. I've already said I agree with the moral argument against the literal idea of Sterek, and from what I've heard, some Sterek fans could be pretty obnoxious about certain things back in the day, like the treatment of Tyler Posey, not to mention the way some fandoms of gay male ships can get really hostile towards the female characters they perceive as competition to their ship. So I'm not trying to defend any bad fan behavior either. That being said, I feel like I've started engaging with this ship on an almost metaphysical level. I don't like Sterek for what it is, or for what it isn't, but almost for a secret third thing. I like the nostalgia of Sterek. I like the embarrassing, adolescent Tumblr golden age charm of Sterek. I like how much of a perfect storm it was. I like how much it enraged Jeff Davis. I like how ridiculous it seems in retrospect. In other words, I enjoy Sterek in a postmodern, cool boy intellectual sort of way, which means that no one is allowed to disagree with me. If you made it this far without wanting to kill me, you should subscribe, and check out my Patreon for bonus Teen Wolf content. You may begin fighting over shipping discourse in the comments in 3, 2, 1...